Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/supportbuddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program and we're in chapter 11 of this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This chapter is titled Meditation, Developing Your Practice. This is where you learn about the 4 types of meditation that the Buddha taught and how to integrate them into your practice. There's 2 primary meditations that everybody's going to need on their journey to enlightenment, and then there's 2 specialized meditations that you'll need in certain situations, and some people might need them and some people might not. So I'm going to help you to understand all about meditation and these 2 specific types of meditation that everybody's going to need. And then I'm also going to introduce you to these other 2 that are specialized meditations that you might need in certain situations. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. And at the same time, I'd like to invite you to join for meditation because we start our classes with meditation. I'm going to be starting the meditation with some chanting to ease us into the meditation. Then I'll be providing some guidance. Then there'll be a period of time where it'll just be quiet and we'll just be meditating together. And then we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting. And then that's where I'll start the class of helping you to understand this topic of meditation and how to develop your practice of meditation. So if you'd like to join, feel free to take a position for meditation, either seated, lying, standing, or walking. And as I mentioned, I'll just ease us into meditation with some chanting. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakava Bhutang Mahakavanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti pisu mahakavam Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vichacharanang Sammuno Sakato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Namasati Satatawa Manu saranang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, in the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. You have nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหะวาพุทธังมหะวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหะวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาดัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังโพโตภาควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you've been joining regularly. Our class today is all about Chapter 11 of the book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This chapter is titled Meditation, Developing Your Practice. This is where you learn all the ins and outs of meditation, specifically 4 types of meditation that the Buddha taught that you're going to need on your journey to enlightenment. There's 2 specific meditations that everyone's going to need, and then there's 2 others that are more specialized meditations that are only needed in certain situations. But I'm going to teach you all of these, at least the first 2, and then the other 2, I'm going to just kind of introduce them to you and help you understand a bit of what they are, so that way, if you ever need them, you'll be able to use them and employ them and even reach out for help as you need help with these. As you go, like we always do, you're always welcome to ask any and all questions that you like. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So let's start with some meditation basics, just to help you understand kind of the beginning of meditation. Keeping in mind that meditation is a primary form of training that the mind needs in order to be able to get to enlightenment, but you wouldn't be able to just meditate your way to enlightenment. There's many things that you would need to learn and grow and develop in order to make your way to enlightenment. But because meditation is a primary type of training that is needed, it's important to understand this meditation and all the others that I'm going to be sharing with you, because this is what's going to help you and propel you into developing the mind to get to enlightenment. You're going to be developing certain qualities of mind in your meditation that you then apply during your day-to-day life. So what I'd like to do is just start with a basic definition of what meditation is. Now, you may or may not agree with the definition that I share with you, but at least when I talk about meditation, you'll know what I'm discussing and what I'm talking about. The way that I describe meditation is that meditation is a technique to actively train the mind during dedicated, independent, purposeful training sessions to eliminate certain unwholesome qualities of the mind and or cultivate certain wholesome qualities of the mind. And you're doing this in the positions of seated, lying, standing, or walking. So it's a dedicated, active, purposeful training session where you're training the mind to cultivate certain wholesome qualities and you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities. And this is done in the seated, lying, standing, or walking position. These are the 4 positions that the Buddha taught that I'll be introducing you to today. Just as important as it is to understand what meditation is, it's also important to understand what meditation isn't. Because by understanding what meditation isn't, then it'll help you to further understand what meditation is. Sometimes today in modern conversations, someone might say, hey, I'm going to go to the gym and meditate, or I'm going to go walk the dog and meditate, or I'm going to go gardening or driving and go meditate. Well, these things may be very helpful for your life and you may appreciate doing these things and they're fun and enjoyable and hobbies that you might decide to do, but these things aren't meditation. And if you thought that these things were meditation, and when we talk about the time and frequency of meditation, if you just went and walked the dog or you just went and gardened, you wouldn't be actually doing the things that you need to do in order to train the mind to cultivate certain wholesome qualities and eliminate certain unwholesome qualities. So while you may do these things and others, it's important to not look at them as meditation. They're other activities. They're not actual meditation itself. As you're developing your meditation practice, you're going to need a meditation teacher because it's only one type of individual that would be able to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. And that's an actual Buddha, an individual who can train their own mind and actually get to enlightenment without the help of any teachers or any guides. This would be an actual Buddha. That's one of the first criteria of what makes a Buddha, is that they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. Then they also will dedicate their time and effort and energy for the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings, helping countless people get to enlightenment. And then they'll preserve their teachings so that after they die, countless more people can get to enlightenment. And this type of individual is very rare in the world. The last one that the world is currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. So that means you're going to need teachers and you're going to need guides. If you're just reading books or you're just watching YouTube videos or things like this, you can't ask a book questions. You're going to need to get clarifying questions answered. You're going to need to develop your practice with the guidance of a teacher. If you didn't have a teacher, you could run into various problems or various difficulties. There was a case when I first started teaching a while back where there was this individual who was trying to get to enlightenment by themselves. They were just watching YouTube videos and reading books. This person was a doctor. They were a practicing physician. And they got to a point where they were sleeping 23 hours a day. They were highly depressed. They were having suicidal thoughts. Their life was falling apart. They weren't able to go to work any longer. They had a fiance that their relationship was falling apart. And this was all because they didn't understand that they needed to have a teacher. And after 2 years of this, they somewhere along the lines figured out that they needed a teacher. They reached out, they found me. They even came here to Thailand for a period of time. And then I helped them here and I helped them when they were back in their home country. And over a period of years, they eventually worked their way out of those difficulties. But for a period of about 4 to 6 years, their life was very difficult and very problematic. They ultimately ended up getting back to work. Their relationship did fall apart. They never got married to that person. But these are the types of things that can happen when you have a lack of wisdom and not knowing that you need a teacher. You might go off in the world and do these kinds of things. Now, I don't suspect any of this will ever happen to you because it's not meditation that led to the suicidal thoughts or the depression or these other things. What it was that they didn't have a teacher to reach out to and get help. They were just kind of patching things together without fully understanding how to train the mind and awaken the mind. Nowadays, in a self-service environment where we have YouTube channels and we have self-service checkouts and things like this, we oftentimes think we can do things by ourselves. But this is a certain thing that you can't actually do by yourself. Getting to enlightenment, it requires you to have a teacher. You wouldn't be able to awaken your mind to enlightenment without a teacher or a guide. So if you would like to consider me your teacher and reach out to me at any point, you're welcome to do that, whether it's now or 6 months from now or 6 years from now or 10 years from now. Even if I never hear from you, you're always welcome to reach out to me and ask questions, either asking questions in class. You can post in our Facebook group, you can send private messages, and you can even schedule personal guidance. Because as you're awakening your mind, you're going to encounter different things that you're not going to be sure about, and you're going to need to reach out and ask questions. And if what you get back from me is, hey, that's normal, just keep going, you're headed in the right direction, this can give you some reassurance and some confidence that you're headed in the right direction. So you're going to need a teacher to be able to help you to develop not only your meditation practice, but all the other aspects of your practice. And then in terms of meditation basics, let's talk about meditation positions. There's 4 positions, and these positions are used at different times for different reasons, because you're not going to be able to permanently be in just one position all the time. There's seated, lying, standing, and walking. The seated position is oftentimes the position that people learn in, and this is oftentimes a primary position that people will use. Either sitting on the floor with your legs crossed, sitting in a chair, on a bench, on a sofa, in a wheelchair, any type of sitting device or sitting on the floor, you can just sit. Oftentimes if people are on the floor, they're going to have a cushion under their rear. They might cross their legs lightly. Some people like to put their legs off the cushion, which gets the hips up in the air, and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, because you're not interested in being in pain. Anytime the body is in pain, you would like to change your position. So the Buddha helped us to be able to see this through his life story, is that the first 2 years of his training, he was actually doing all kinds of harmful things to the body. And he realized that this doesn't actually lead to enlightenment. So there's no amount of benefit that's going to come in you just breathing through the pain. There's no certificates that are given out to anybody for breathing through the pain when you're in meditation. So anytime that you experience pain, just adjust the body position. And that's where lying position comes in. That if you're sitting in the seated position with your legs crossed and your hands and arms resting comfortably and your upper body erect, which keeps the mind attentive and alert, you might notice that there's some physical pain somewhere in the body. And if you notice that, you can either start with lying position, or you can switch to a lying position where you're lying on your back, face up. And oftentimes people will call this in yoga, they'll call it corpse pose or resting pose or shavasana, where you're just laying on your back with your arms out to the side and your palms up. And this completely relaxes all the muscles in the entire body. And this could be a potential way for you to meditate. Then there's standing position as well. Where this comes in is that with seated and lying, you might oftentimes find yourself falling asleep. If you're noticing this, this is normal, because as you're working in your meditation, you're working through all that pollution in your mind, that you might notice that when you first start meditating, that the mind becomes tired or sleepy. And if this is the case, you could switch to a standing position or even a walking position. This will help invigorate the mind. So standing position, you would just stand up straight with your arms in front of you, kind of clasp at the wrist lightly, or the arms to the side, or the arms behind you. You just stand up straight. Then there's walking position. Walking position is also used if you're noticing that you're dozing off and falling asleep, but it's also used if you have an overactive mind or a lot of energy in the mind. You can switch to this walking, or you can start with the walking position. If the last thing you're thinking about is sitting down in meditation and there's just too much energy and overactivity in the mind, you could start with a walking and then move to a seated if you like. Or if you're sitting in meditation, 2 or 3 minutes in, you notice your mind's really busy, you could switch to a walking meditation. And I've done videos on this, and you'll see them on our YouTube channel, where you can learn walking meditation, because I teach this in some various courses and retreats that I share. But if you haven't been in one of those and you need walking meditation, you can learn this through our YouTube channel. So these positions can be employed at different times for different reasons. I've used seated position primarily. Probably 80% of the meditation I've done, maybe upwards of 90, has been in the seated position. But there's times where I haven't been able to sit. I was in a motorbike accident in 2019, and I couldn't cross my legs and I couldn't really sit. All I could do was lay in a hospital bed with an IV hooked up. So because I knew lying position, I could still meditate, because you're interested in creating a consistent meditation practice that you can be meditating every single day. And then there's times where I use standing position. There were times when I was maybe at a bus stop and I knew that the bus wasn't coming for 15 or 20 minutes, and I could just stand there and actually close the eyes and meditate. Or there were some times where I was waiting in line and I was knowing that this line wouldn't move for 10, 15, 20 minutes because it was a very slow line, and I could stand there and do some meditation. I wouldn't consider it one of my primary meditations, my 2 or 3 meditations per day, but it was maybe like a little touch up, maybe 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. Why not? Right? Or if I'm waiting in a doctor's office and you're in the seated position, you could be doing some meditation. So these are all meditation positions that you can interchange, or you can just do it as a standalone right from the beginning. So I'm going to pause here and see if you guys have any questions on the meditation basics before we go on and learn some more. Remember, if you would like to ask questions, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any and all questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's go to the next part, which is talking about starting and conducting meditation. The important thing to keep in mind when you're looking at developing a meditation practice is remember that the mind is the boss and the body is the employee. Essentially, the mind is controlling whatever's going on and the body's just following along. So because of this, you need to be able to understand that it's important to go through the body in order to get to the mind. What I mean by that is you need to go through the employee to get to the boss. That if the body is in a painful position, if the employees are painful, they're not going to take you to go see the boss. So if the body's in a painful position, you're not going to be able to train the mind because all you're going to be experiencing is pain, 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 pain. But also, if the employees were too luxurious, right? If they're like in a lap of luxury, they're not going to be interested to take you to go see the boss there either. So you'd like to have this middle way where the body can be comfortable, not luxurious and not painful, but it's comfortable. Because then with the body being comfortable, you can then access the mind and start training the mind. As you're starting your meditation practice, you would like to set up mindfulness in front of you. These are actually the words of the Buddha. He shares this when he talks about meditation and he talks about conducting meditation. He repeats in many different discourses where it's important to set up mindfulness in front of you. What mindfulness is awareness of mind. Essentially what he's saying is bring some awareness to the mind before you start meditating. Don't just plop down into meditation and start meditating because it's going to be 5, 10, 15 minutes before you start getting any benefit because you just plop down into meditation. And that's one of the reasons why I use chanting, is to cultivate this awareness of mind and awareness of breath, ease the mind into meditation, and actually get more benefit out of the meditation itself. So if you'd like to use chanting, you can, but there's other things you can do too. So you're going to need to set up this mindfulness or awareness of mind where you ease into meditation so that you can get benefit from the meditation right from the very beginning. In terms of a time, frequency, or schedule, you're not going to be able to meditate exactly the same time all the time, every day. So if you set up on your schedule that you're going to meditate every day at 8 a.m., this isn't going to be possible, right? The Buddha meditated 3 times per day, morning, midday, and evening. So he didn't have an exact time to meditate because they didn't even have times, pieces, or watches during his lifetime. 2,500 years ago, they couldn't keep precise time. So he says it in his teachings that he meditated morning, midday, and evening. These are like anchor points. And this is what you would like to do too, is somewhere in the morning, be meditating, somewhere in the evening, be meditating, and then if you can get a midday meditation and do that. If you're going to do an evening meditation, you would like to do it before the mind gets sleepy. So if you normally go to bed, say at 10 o'clock, you would like to be meditating somewhere around 9:15 or something like that. Because if you wait until the mind's sleepy, you're not going to be able to do that dedicated, active, purposeful training session where you're actively training the mind. So you would like to bump that up a little bit. Or even 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, there's no harm in meditating there too, but you're just not interested in the mind being sleepy. You're not going to be able to meditate at exactly the same time. There were times where I'd be meditating and my son would walk into the room and say, "Hey Dad, I need you to take me to school." And I'd only been meditating 2 or 3 minutes at that point. And I said, "Really? I thought your mom was going to take you to school." He said, "Yeah, me too, but she's gone. She's not even here." And I was like, "All right, well, I guess I'll take you to school." So if you had this fixed time that you were permanently trying to meditate at the exact same time, this is craving permanence, and you'd be agitated or frustrated when this kind of thing occurred. So you can't meditate at exactly the same time because of impermanence. Things are going to happen. So I just took him to school and I came back and I meditated when I came back. There's also not a specific time of day that is going to make meditation any more beneficial than others. If you hear somebody say that meditating at 3:30 a.m. every day is going to produce more benefit, well, there's nothing happening at 3:30 a.m. that's going to make your meditation any better at 3:30 a.m. than any other time during the day. And keep in mind that the Buddha didn't have a watch to keep track of time in that precise manner. So if he was able to get to enlightenment with these anchor points of morning, midday, and evening, you would be able to as well. So you can fluctuate this. You would like to get 2 or 3 sessions of meditation per day. That's what you'd like to build up to. And you'd like to build up to about 30 minutes or more. Understanding that this is going to take maybe 6 months, a year, or 2 years to build up to. You need to gradually build up to that type of frequency and that type of time. What you'll notice is that frequency is more important than duration. So if you have the option of 1 meditation for 30 minutes or 2 for 15, go for the 2 for 15. That's going to be more beneficial for you. And then gradually expand that 15 to make it longer and longer. And there's probably certain things in your life that you're going to need to clear out, because meditating 2 or 3 times a day for 30 minutes or more might sound like a lot of time for somebody who's really involved in a lot of different things. But you need to look at your life, because there's probably certain unbeneficial things that you're doing, or you might be loading yourself up with a whole bunch of erroneous tasks that you could start to thin out. Like if you're looking at social media for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours a day, you can thin that out and bring it down a bit. Or maybe you're watching a lot of YouTube videos, you can thin that out and bring it down to less time, so that way it gives you more time to do beneficial things like meditating. So you're going to need to clear certain things out and bring it down and reduce it so that you can make space for meditation. And by you making that choice, it's going to produce wholesome results for you, or wholesome karma. When you're meditating, you might notice sleepiness during the meditation, like we were talking about. And you have 2 different options here. Is you could switch your position, like we were talking about, from like a seated or lying to maybe like a standing or walking. That's one option, is you could just switch your meditation position. Or you could just get some sleep. That's an option as well. Because when you're first starting to meditate, you probably haven't been sleeping very well. Even if you're sleeping 8 hours a day or longer, your mind isn't maybe getting a very good quality of sleep. And when you start giving the mind what it needs, which is these teachings and training it through meditation, you might notice that your mind has a tendency to more easily sleep. So during meditation, you might notice a 3-month, 6-month period where your mind is induced into sleep while you're actually meditating. And if that's the case, just get some sleep, and then when you wake up, then you can meditate, right? So you can do that as well. So you can either extend your meditation by changing the position to standing or walking, or you could just get some rest and get some sleep and then meditate when you wake up. Those are both options. Then you might notice certain physical sensations during your meditation. This is like itching along the skin or something like this. If you notice these kinds of things, if you are experiencing this, you would like to ignore it. You would like to notice that this is an impermanent, that it arises, it changes, and it fades away. But as you're doing this, you might notice 5 seconds in or so that, the mind just wants to scratch this thing so bad, right? And your mind's having a hard time to let it go. Well, if that's the case, go ahead and scratch it, right? But then try to elongate that. Try to go from 5 seconds to maybe 8 or 10 or 12 seconds. And each time try to make it a little bit longer until you get to the point where you don't have to keep stopping to itch. Notice that this itch is impermanent. It arises, it changes, and it fades away. And you can reside unaffected by this itch. So if you notice this is occurring, you can do this where you're elongating the amount of time until eventually you can go through the entire life cycle of a scratch or an itch, and your mind is not disturbed by it, and you can just stay focused on the breath. Now, if you notice physical pain, like we were mentioning, you would like to adjust your body position. That is the way that you would like to handle that, because pain is a way for your body and the mind to communicate and say, hey, there's something wrong here. You should take action. So you should heave that advice. You should heave that notification that your knee or your hip or your back or something is hurting. There's something that's not being settled properly there, that the body is hurting or there's pain there, and you would like to take action. That's your mind being able to help you see that, hey, there's something here you need to take action about. So don't breathe through the pain. That's not going to actually help you to get to meditation, because when your mind is just experiencing pain, it would be very hard to train your mind to cultivate certain wholesome qualities and then eliminate certain unwholesome qualities. So you would like to adjust your positions. Then you might notice visual stimulation during your meditation. This is like you might notice certain colors or certain imagery or things like this, because the way that sight occurs is it's happening inside the brain. So even with your eyes closed, you can actually still see things. The eyeball itself, it's just a lens that brings in light. So when your eyes are closed, you can actually still see various colors and certain imagery. There's nothing special going on here. You're not a special person. You don't need to go out and figure out what these things are, because I'm going to share with you what it is. But sometimes when people see the color green, they're like, oh, what does this mean? I'm going to get wealthy. Or they see the color purple. They're like, oh, does that mean my boyfriend or girlfriend's going to come back to me? Like, what does this mean? I'll share with you what is actually happening. When you're training your mind is intangible. It's non-physical. And when you're training your mind, it has an effect on the brain. The brain is the physical organ. These are two separate things, but they're connected together. So as you're training your mind, there's physical changes that are happening to the brain. And because it's the brain that is involved in sight, as these physical structures of the brain are changing, you can notice various colors and various imagery. You might even hear this occurring in the skull. You might hear the brain physically changing sometimes. And doctors and researchers are sharing with us that this is what's occurring. Because nowadays we have MRIs, CAT scans, and other devices that these things can be measured, where during the lifetime of the Buddha they couldn't be. So these physical changes that are occurring in the brain, this is actually very positive. And once you get to a certain part of your development and those physical changes have occurred, what doctors are sharing is that the brain never goes back to the old way that it was before. And this is what the Buddha shares with us about the mind too, that once you get to this first stage of enlightenment, your mind doesn't regress and go backwards. So as you're training your mind, there's this effect to the physical structures of the brain, and it might produce various colors. And these are certain things that are just normal. You might even notice certain imagery or certain memories and things like this. Some people even observe past lives, not only in meditation, but outside of meditation. These things can occur as the residual memories are coming up to the surface of the mind. So you might notice these things. And if you're ever curious, you can reach out and I will help you to understand it. But it's most likely these things that I'm talking about here. And then sometimes people are meditating with external stimulus. What I mean by this is things like incense or a candle or music or a phone app or a special blanket or a certain scent in the air that they might put in the air when they're actually meditating. These kinds of things, while somebody might be using them now and you might be using these kinds of things now, I would encourage you to eliminate them out of your practice, because the mind's just going to get attached and cling to these things. And what you would like to do is develop a practice where you can meditate anywhere, anytime. All you need to meditate is three things. You only need the body, the mind, and the breath. These are the only three things that you actually need to meditate. The body, the mind, and the breath. And if you have those three things, you can meditate. And you'll have those three things with you for the rest of this life. But if there's this special candle, or there's a special scent, or a special blanket, or certain music that you can only meditate with these things, that means when you're off in the mountains hiking and you're 3 days or 5 days away from civilization, and you decide you would like to meditate in this beautiful forest, you're not going to be able to do that because you don't have your special blanket with you or your special incense or candle. Or say you're taking a walk in a park and you're like, wow, this is a really nice place. I'd like to sit down and do some meditation. Well, you're not going to be able to do that if you can only meditate when you have this special thing. So you would like to clear all these things out of your practice so that you're just meditating with the body, the mind, and the breath. And if you're currently meditating with these kinds of things now, you can gradually move the mind away from that. The way that you do this is, say you're meditating with music. Maybe you do one session with music and one session without it. And then you do one session with music, one session without it, one session with music, one session without it. And now the mind's acclimated to this little tiny baby step. Now you do one session with music, 2 or 3 without it. One session with it, 2 or 3 without it. And then you gradually expand that where it's one session, maybe 4, 5, or 6 without it. One session with it, 4, 5, 6, or 7 without it. And now the mind, having experienced these little incremental changes, it doesn't necessarily notice this impermanence, because the mind craves permanence. It wants things to be permanent. So when you start making shifts and changes in your life, the mind in the unenlightened state doesn't like this, whether it's about your living situation or your work situation or friends or family, or even changes in your meditation practice. The mind isn't going to necessarily like this. So all these little incremental changes, the mind almost doesn't even know what's happening. So introducing these changes into your meditation practice where you can get to the point where you're just meditating with the body, the mind, and the breath can be very helpful. And this is also why it's wise to include these other body positions like seated, lying, standing, and walking, so that your mind doesn't get attached to just meditating in one position. The mind can actually get attached to meditation itself. So you're interested in introducing this impermanence into your meditation practice, so that way your mind doesn't get to the point where it's clinging or craving or attached to any specific thing with your meditation. So again, I'm going to pause here and see what questions you guys have. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. We have a question coming in on Zoom. Arvind is asking a question. Hi, David. I have a question about karma. I know it's not the topic today, so I could please wait for you at the end of class to ask the question. I don't want to ask the question out of turn and disrupt your class. Okay, Arvind, yeah, if you would like to talk about this at the end of class, that would be helpful. That way we can stay focused on meditation for today. And then at the end, we can definitely open up to any and all questions that you guys have. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. It looks like Ihang has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. You can hear me, right?
Sure can.
I just have one question. During the meditation, I feel like it's somehow changed. Before, I feel like the mind and the body somehow synced very well with the breath. And then recently, I feel like the synchronization doesn't feel very well. And it feels like the mind somehow still focused on the breath, but somehow there is something between mind and the body with the breath. Like it doesn't sync very well. I'm not sure if I describe clear.
Yeah.
Why would
These kinds of things can happen. What you'll notice is you can have periods of time where your meditation practice is quite solid and quite stable, multiple weeks. And then you can go through periods of time where things are shaken up, particularly if you've moved or you've changed jobs or someone has died in your life, or maybe a pet or something like this has died, or maybe someone's sick or ill, or maybe you're sick or ill. These kinds of things can shake up the mind during meditation, but also outside of meditation as well. And even sometimes there might not be anything that you're aware of, but something in the mind is not clicking, and you can have these kinds of things. So just stay dedicated and diligent to continuing to develop your practice. The mind kind of wandering and not being able to focus in on the breath, this is just because of its lack of discipline and control. So just each time you're meditating, keep working to actively keep the mind on the breath. And when it moves off the breath, keep bringing it back. This is what's going to ultimately help you train the mind to more and more be able to focus on the breath.
Okay, thank you. I feel like, I just feel like somehow more and more meditation sessions goes to this some sort of unsynchronized state, and somehow it decreases my confidence on the meditation practice. So I don't know if there is any way I could bring some sort of confidence more, or hope more, or if I should change my view on meditation.
Yeah, there's nothing that you're going to be able to do to force the mind to do these kinds of things. That's not what you're interested in doing. But you will notice periods of time, even weeks, where the mind will be shaken up. There were times where I could go like maybe 4 to 6 weeks where everything was quite peaceful in the meditation. And then just one day I would sit down to do meditation and things were all shaken up. And that could sometimes last for 3 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, even 8 weeks, where things were all shaken up. And this is where you need to just stay dedicated and have the confidence that the Buddha's teachings are leading you in a beneficial direction because you've seen enough benefit to a certain degree. Notice that having this confidence in your teacher and your own ability to get to enlightenment. So having the confidence to arise dedication and diligence is what will see you through that period of time. And just like I experienced times where I would sit down and I'd just be surprised by how the mind went from the previous session that was so peaceful and so calm to now being shaken up. The same thing occurred in the other direction too, that one day I would just sit down and all of a sudden everything was peaceful in the mind. And I was like, whoa, like I don't even know what happened. All I did was stay dedicated and consistent to the meditation practice. So if you stay consistent and dedicated to it, you'll notice that you'll go through these periods of up and down, and you'll be able to see through that by being dedicated and diligent.
Okay, Thank you very much, Teacher David.
Yeah, you're welcome. We have some questions coming in here on Zoom as well from Brent. He says, I work outside in the Arizona heat. My midday meditation almost always includes a quick nap. Is it better to meditate before or after the nap? That's up to you. You can decide, what your mind is feeling like. In some cases, you might do it before. In some cases, you might do it after. You need to decide for yourself what's working best. And what I encourage people to do in these kinds of situations is do it one way for like a week or two or so and observe how the mind experiences that, and then do it another way for like a week or two or so and observe, because every mind functions a little bit different. Even though every unenlightened mind has craving, anger, and ignorance and these 10 fetters and so forth, these kinds of things like this is going to be unique to you, and you might notice that it works one way in a certain way, and that's what works best for you, but it might not be that way for somebody else. And you might even notice that for a period of time, maybe multiple months or years, it works really well in one way, and then because of impermanence, it shifts and you start doing it a different way, and that's working better. So you need to stay open to these shifts and changes in your meditation practice and test it out so that you can know the truth and see what's best for you. Okay, it looks like Julia has a question too. She says, thank you, Teacher David. I have been told in the past if my knee or leg goes numb to ignore it, even though it's uncomfortable, to disassociate the body from the mind. I wanted to know if that is true. I don't recommend that at all. And that's one of the reasons why I include that in my talk, because unfortunately a lot of people are misguided in this way. That during the lifetime of the Buddha, when he first went away from the royal palace, he was training with some teachers where they were hanging themselves upside down from trees, they were laying on beds of nails, they were piercing their body with metal implements, they were starving themselves. And the thought was that if you could overcome this pain through causing the physical body pain and overcome it through the mind, that you would get to enlightenment. And this was realized by the Buddha that this isn't true. This doesn't actually work. That's why he never taught that. So nowadays, there's still people who think this way and have this kind of thought that you should breathe through the pain and just ignore it. But that pain is there for a reason. It's telling the mind, hey, there's something wrong with your knee. You need to take action. That's the whole reason why it's there. So if you ignore that, you'll get to a point where you're damaging something in the knee. I know an individual here in Thailand who lives out in the eastern part of Thailand who he can't even walk. He used to meditate for like 7 days straight without eating, without drinking, without urinating or defecating. Just 7 days straight, he said that he used to meditate for these extended periods of time. And now he can't even walk. He is said to have gotten to enlightenment. That's what people around him say. And he appears to potentially have gotten to enlightenment, but he can't even go anywhere on his own. He has to have other people support him in order to be able to walk. And this is, I suspect, because of sitting in meditation and the body was experiencing pain. And these long sits like that, it's unwise, that you need to switch around. So if you ever notice any pain, just adjust the body position. There's nothing that's going to help or benefit the mind by continuing to stay like that. It's just damaging the body. So that's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up, Julia. She has another question here. The other question is, when you are mindfully engaged in an activity like walking or running, that is just extreme awareness, right? But not meditation, right? I appreciate all the guidance. Yeah, so when you're going about in daily life and you're exercising, for example, you should be practicing mindfulness or awareness of mind. That's what you're practicing, but it's not meditation. In meditation, you're exercising the mind. This is essentially what you're doing, is you're going off to meditate in order to actively train the mind to eliminate certain unwholesome qualities and cultivate certain wholesome qualities. And now in daily life, you're practicing those wholesome qualities. So you're going to see that here. I'm going to teach it to you about each meditation. What are you eliminating and what you're cultivating? So when you're out there jogging or exercising, you have awareness of your mind. That's what you would like to practice, where you're aware of what's going on in your mind. But that's not meditation itself. That's actually exercising and practicing mindfulness or awareness of mind during your meditation. Arvind has a question here. He says, Teacher David, what do I do if during meditation the breath slows down or stops and the mind does as well? Then I'm just left with a feeling of nothingness. Is that a distraction? Should I force myself to start breathing and concentrating on the breath again, or should I remain in the stillness? Just reside in the stillness. That's what happens as you're developing your meditation practice, is the mind will slow down, it'll become quieted and still, and even the breath will slow down, and it can even stop. And it's almost like time is standing still, and you can just reside there. But ultimately, of course, the body's going to need to take a breath, and you're going to need to move on with that. But if you're like to stay there, go ahead, but just don't be obsessed with it and don't just hold on to it. But instead, just stay in that stillness. The mind is quieted and still, and that's what you're ultimately working to, is stilling the mind. Okay? All right, let me see if we have any other questions. I guess, Arvin, you had your hand up, so that was probably your question there. Mayuli on Facebook has a question. Sometimes I find that the body becomes very sensitive during meditation. I can feel that what seems like nerves system moving through the body, especially in the facial area. Yeah, as you're training the mind, there's these changes to the brain, right? And the brain is firing off all these different things throughout the body. So you can notice this tingling in different parts of the body. And this is an indication to you that you're training the mind, because the mind and the brain being connected. And now with these changes happening to the brain, you can notice this tingling of the nervous system throughout the body. This is completely normal. So you can just keep going and doing exactly what you're doing, because that's exactly what you would experience for some people. But if you notice any pleasantness with that, if you're noticing the pleasantness coming in, if the mind's forming pleasant feelings, you'd like to cut that off and just keep bringing the mind back to the breath, back to the breath, back to the breath. Same thing with this other things that we're talking about, is anytime the mind is seeing those colors or imagery or anything like that, just cut that off and bring the mind back to the breath. Don't dwell in that and have those pleasant thoughts, and don't think that these things are permanent either, because if you have all these different colors and visualizations, for example, and the mind takes all this pleasantness, experiences conditioned pleasant feelings, well, when those things aren't occurring anymore, you'll feel sad or frustrated, or you might long and yearn and crave for these things to occur. So all of these kinds of things are normal, and when they're occurring, you just know that, okay, things are shifting, things are changing. Let me bring the mind back to the breath. So very well. Okay, it looks like Julia has another question here. Will your mind know once it is enlightened or achieved first stage of enlightenment, just so we are not complacent? Thank you. Yes, by the time you get to even the jhanas, which are the 4 preliminary phases, you will know that your mind is in those jhanas if you've been studying with me, because you'll know what the jhanas are, and you'll know that your mind's moving into them. And the same thing with the first stage of enlightenment, and definitely enlightenment itself. By the time you get there, you will absolutely know that your mind is enlightened. But I encourage people not to convince themselves that they are enlightened, because once you do that, the mind can become complacent, or it can become arrogant or conceited. And if either of those two things arise, then the mind's not actually enlightened. So instead, you just stay dedicated and diligent to continuing to cultivate wisdom your entire life, because once the mind's enlightened, that's like the beginning of the rest of your life, where now the mind is no longer experiencing any discontentedness, and now your mind's functioning optimally. It's focused, it's concentrated, you have clarity. So if there's anything that you're interested in doing in life, you'd be able to easily do that as an enlightened being, because maybe, for example, you were always interested in flying a helicopter, but you never did because you didn't have the confidence that you could learn and actually do that. But now with an enlightened mind, you'll have all the confidence in the world. You have clarity of mind. Maybe you decide to go learn to be a helicopter pilot, right? Because if you've been cultivating wisdom your entire life to get to this enlightened mental state, and you've solved the biggest, most impactful problem in your life, which is this discontentedness, and you've gotten to enlightenment, you're not going to just stop cultivating wisdom, because you will have seen that cultivating wisdom has led to so many benefits in your life that you'll continue to cultivate wisdom your entire life, because there's plenty of things out there in the world to cultivate wisdom about. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to sharing some words of the Buddha with you guys, where he's introducing the 4 types of meditations that he actually taught during his lifetime. And then I'm going to share with you guys what these 4 meditations are. So prior to this particular excerpt from the Buddha, he was talking to his students about 5 things that they should develop as part of their practice. And then he got to this point where he says, having based himself on these 5 things, meaning the 5 things he was talking about before, the monk should develop further another 4 things. 1. The perception of unattractiveness of the body should be developed to abandon lust. So this is a meditation to eliminate sexual cravings, because as long as the mind has sexual cravings in the mind, you're not going to be able to get to peace and joy. Because when you get sex, you'll be happy and excited, but then when you can't get it, you'll be agitated and frustrated. So if you're looking to reduce your sexual cravings or eliminate them 100%, there's a meditation that I'm going to introduce you to that will help you to accomplish this. Loving kindness should be developed to abandon ill will. This is the meditation to eliminate anger, hatred, and ill will, that second poison or that second unwholesome root, and all the lesser versions like frustration, irritation, annoyance. By the time you get to enlightenment, you don't even have the slightest dislike towards another being. The third one here, he says, mindfulness of breathing or breathing mindfulness meditation should be developed to cut off thoughts. So the goal here isn't to eliminate your thoughts, but to cut them off and bring the mind back to the breath. We're going to talk about this in more detail, but this is the primary form of meditation that he taught, is breathing mindfulness meditation. And he prioritizes this in other discourses, and he talks about it as a real priority. And then loving kindness meditation as the second priority. And these two are the two meditations that everybody would need to know in order to get to enlightenment, where these others are optional. So he's not listing them in order of importance here, he's just listing them out. Number 4, the perception of impermanence should be developed to eradicate the conceit, I am. When one perceives impermanence, the perception of non-self is stabilized. One who perceives non-self eradicates the conceit, I am, which is nibbana, or enlightenment, in this very life. So this is a meditation to realize non-self, and I'll introduce you to that today as well. So these are the 4 meditations that the Buddha taught. So you'll see countless meditations out there in the world, but you don't need to learn all these different countless meditations. You only need to learn 2 primary ones and then possibly 2 others. And the benefit of this is that you can get really deep into your meditation practice. Whereas if you spread yourself very broadly and you're trying to learn 50 or 100 different meditations, you're not going to be able to grasp all those and become an expert at all of those. So these meditations are addressing the primary problems in the mind, which we talked about: craving, anger, and ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. Those are the 3 poisons, or the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires: craving, anger, and ignorance. So breathing mindfulness meditation is addressing the craving, loving kindness meditation is addressing the anger, and you're cultivating wisdom to address the ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. So the Buddha developed his meditations around the actual problems that he discovered in the mind. So now what I'm going to do is show you these meditations in order of priority, and I'm showing you what you're eliminating in terms of unwholesome qualities and what you're cultivating in terms of wholesome qualities. So what you're eliminating during breathing mindfulness meditation is craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, the chasing after things. The mind in the unenlightened state with craving, desire, attachment is it holds on. It wants things to be permanent. It can't let go. So what you're training your mind to do is let go. Let go, let go. So you're not trying to eliminate your thoughts, even though you will get to a period of time where the mind is still and quieted. This is what you're actually working towards. You still have a thought. Even when the mind's enlightened, you're going to have an occasional thought during your meditation. So in the unenlightened state with breathing mindfulness meditation, you'll have a bombardment of thoughts, or you'll indulge in a thought and follow that for a period of time before you realize you're meditating, you need to bring your mind back to the breath. But by the time you get to enlightenment and you've accumulated these benefits of letting go and letting go and letting go and letting go, eventually you'll still have thoughts in meditation, but you'll notice it right away and you'll be able to cut it off and let it go readily. So you're eliminating this longing, yearning, the mind chasing after things and not wanting to let go. And you're also cultivating the wholesome qualities of mindfulness or awareness of mind, and concentration, being able to focus on a single object so that you can bring forth these wholesome qualities in your day-to-day life. So in meditation, you're training in one way. You're cutting off anything and everything that's coming up. But then in daily life, you're only cutting off the unwholesome qualities that are arising. So we're going to talk about this a little bit more here in a moment. The loving kindness meditation, this is helping you eliminate anger, hatred, and ill will, and all those lesser versions like frustration, irritation, annoyance. It even helps you to eliminate negative self-talk in your own mind. If you have this inner dialogue where you're degrading and diminishing yourself, this meditation will help you to eliminate that. And what you're doing is you're cultivating the wholesome quality of loving kindness, or this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. Then there's this meditation to eliminate sexual cravings, which if you have an extensive amount of sexual craving, maybe you have 4, 5, 6 different sexual partners at one time, you would like to bring that down to one, realizing that that would be wise, you can use this particular meditation to help you reduce your sexual cravings. Or if you're looking to eliminate sexual activity altogether, you can use this meditation to do that. And the way that it accomplishes this is by developing the unattractiveness of the body. This is what the Buddha teaches, is that the mind, the reason why it's interested in having sex with another being is because it sees the outer shell. It sees the hair, the makeup, the jewelry, the clothes, the muscles, the skin tone, and we envision these kinds of things and we're interested in having sex. In fact, we do all kinds of things in the unenlightened state to beautify the body so that somebody will be interested in having sex with us, right? So you can actually develop what's called the unattractiveness of the body, and I'll teach you guys how to do that. Then there's a meditation to realize non-self. If you remember back to when I taught what personal existence view is, that particular fetter where the mind's clinging to the self-image or the self-identity, there's a meditation to help you release that, where you're training the mind to let go of this personal existence view, realizing that this body nor this mind is you. And you're doing that through developing impermanence, and I'm going to show you how to do that as well. So these are some words of the Buddha about breathing mindfulness meditation and meditation in general that I'll share with you as we go into talking about each one of these individual meditations. Here's a particular saying from the Buddha where he says, "A pot without a stand is easy to tip over." A pot without a stand is easy to tip over. What he's saying here is a mind without a meditation practice is easy to become discontent. So your mind is the pot and your stand is the meditation practice. And as you meditate more and more and you accumulate more and more benefits, this stand becomes wider and wider and it's harder and harder to tip over the mind. But if you don't have a meditation practice, it's easy for you to become angry. It's easy for you to become frustrated or agitated or annoyed or feeling bored or lonely or feeling guilt or shame or fear or any of these other discontent feelings. So a pot without a stand is easy to tip over. A mind without a meditation practice is easy to become discontent. That's what he's essentially saying here. Now here's a discourse where he's explaining the importance of breathing mindfulness meditation and the purpose of it. He says, "Monks, there is one thing that when developed and cultivated leads exclusively to liberation, to freedom from strong feelings, to elimination, to peace, to direct knowledge, experience, to enlightenment, to nibbana. What is that one thing? Mindfulness of breathing, breathing mindfulness meditation. This is that one thing that, when developed and cultivated, leads exclusively to liberation, to freedom from strong feelings, to elimination, to peace, to direct knowledge, experience, to enlightenment, to nibbana." So here he's saying that this meditation of breathing mindfulness meditation, it has one purpose, it has one goal. It is to get to enlightenment and bring about this peace in the mind. He's not saying you only need one thing in order to get to enlightenment. Otherwise, he would have just taught for 45 years. He would have just taught meditation. But he taught for 45 years, and his teachings are in 45 large volumes of books that are very thick because he has an extensive amount of teachings because you need to learn these things in order to be able to get to enlightenment. So if he was only going to teach meditation and that's all you needed to get to enlightenment, he would have just taught that. So that's one of the big misunderstandings of the life of the Buddha. People think that he just sat under a tree, he meditated and got to enlightenment. But there's a whole host of other things that you need to learn and grow and develop in order to get to enlightenment. Essentially what he's saying here is that meditation, this breathing mindfulness meditation, leads to one thing, which is enlightenment. It's kind of like saying your car, it leads to one thing, transportation. But you need other things in your life besides transportation. You need food, clothing, shelter, medical care. You need these other things. But this car, it leads to one thing, which is transportation. So this meditation, it leads to one thing, which is the peace. It leads to this enlightened mental state. It leads to the elimination and freedom of these strong feelings. It leads to liberation of the mind. That's what this meditation leads to. So if you are going to get to enlightenment, you're going to need this particular meditation. Breathing mindfulness meditation is a primary form of training to help you get to enlightenment. Now, in terms of going through each individual meditation and teaching you guys what these are, breathing mindfulness meditation. The way that you do this is the way that I've taught in various classes and courses, and the way that we did today, where you focus on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the body or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the body. As thoughts arise, you cut them off and let them go, bringing the mind back to the breath, bringing the mind back to the breath, bringing the mind back to the breath. The goal isn't to eliminate your thoughts. The goal is to notice them sooner and sooner and to be able to easily let them go. So in meditation, you're training in one way, which is to cut off and let go of anything and everything that's coming up. But then in daily life, you're only cutting off the unwholesome thoughts. If you have a wholesome thought, like you'd like to take your mom to dinner or to lunch or something like that, go for it. Right? Go do that thing if that's what you would like to do. But if you're thinking about punching someone in the face, maybe you'd like to punch your boss in the face, cut that off and let it go. That's going to produce unwholesome results, right? Or if you're thinking about stealing or having sexual misconduct or lying or taking substances that cause heedlessness, cut that off and let that go. It's going to lead to unwholesome results. So in meditation, you're training in one way, which is to cut off everything and anything, because you're trying to train the mind to let go. But then in daily life, you're only cutting off the unwholesome thoughts. This is kind of like a professional athlete. They go into the gym, they might do cardiovascular training, agility training, weight training, but their sport is pole vaulting. So when they go out and do their sport, it looks very different than what they were doing in the gym. So it's the same kind of thing, is that you're training your mind in one way and exercising it in one way, and you're doing something different in day-to-day life. So breathing mindfulness meditation is going to bring about the cultivation of mindfulness, which is awareness of mind, concentration, which is focus, and it's going to help you train your mind to easily let go, because that's what's causing the mind to be angry and sad and frustrated and discontent, is your mind's holding on. You can't let go. So that when you're in a certain situation, your mind is holding on to this particular thing and it just can't let go. So that's why you're training your mind to let go. Then with loving kindness meditation, you're essentially rewiring the mind to be loving and kind. That in the unenlightened state, when you have a lack of wisdom and you get angry or frustrated, you might think that other people are causing that. But what you've learned so far is that it's not other people causing this anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings. It's being caused by the mind itself. So being bitter and harsh and hostile to others isn't helping you. It's just making the problem worse, because now when you put that out, that's what's coming back to you. So you'd like to rewire the mind with loving kindness meditation so you can be loving and kind through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. So there's these affirmations that we do where you say, may I be peaceful. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be free of all discontentedness and the suffering it causes. And you do this on the out breath. And then you customize this meditation based on your specific goals and your specific needs. So if there's particular people in your life that you have anger and hatred towards, even if you're never going to see them ever again in your life, you would like to eradicate that. Because as long as you have that anger in your mind, it's hurting you. Sometimes people hold on to anger, feeling resentful, like they're harming somebody else. When in reality, you're not harming anyone else, you're just harming your own mind. It's like holding a hot coal in your hand and trying to burn somebody else with it. Nobody's getting burned but you. So you can get rid of this anger and hostility by training your mind with loving kindness meditation. So you'd customize this for your specific needs, where you might think, may Bob be peaceful, right? Or may my mom be peaceful. You go through all 4 of these affirmations. And I've taught this in other classes. So this is a meditation that's going to help you rewire the mind in order to become loving and kind and gentle, where you have this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. These are the words of the Buddha here, where he says, develop meditation on loving kindness. For when you develop meditation on loving kindness, any ill will be abandoned. This is how a Buddha speaks. Very clear, very concise, very precise. You don't need to interpret his words. You don't need to figure out what he was saying. It's very clear and very straightforward. He's explaining how loving kindness meditation is what will lead to this eradication of the anger, hatred, and ill will, because he had those same qualities in his mind before he started training his mind. And then when he trained his mind with loving kindness meditation, he could see that it fixed that. So he's sharing with you what he did in order to be able to get to this enlightened mental state. And loving kindness meditation is what eradicates that second pollution or poison or unwholesome root of anger, hatred, and ill will, and all those lesser versions, including the negative self-talk within your own mind. So now I'm going to share with you a meditation to eliminate sexual cravings. And when I flip the visual aid here, you're going to see a dead corpse that has been dissected and opened up. The torso is opened up. So if you're not interested in seeing that, you might decide to look away. But this is what we do in order to train the mind to develop the unattractiveness of the body. So when the Buddha was alive, they didn't have photos and they didn't have pictures. So what they did is they did what's called the 32-part body meditation, where they would focus on each individual body part, like the lungs, the heart, the gallbladder, all these different things, even starting with the hair and working their way in. And they would meditate on each individual part of the body, visualizing it in their mind to develop this perception of unattractiveness of the body. And in some cases, they were in the presence of a corpse. If the corpse was there and it was going to be burned in order to be cremated, they might meditate around the corpse, because not only do you see the corpse withering away, but you smell it too. And then this develops the unattractiveness of the body, where someone's not interested in having sex with the human body. So because we don't have access to corpses in the same way that they did during the lifetime of the Buddha, and they didn't have access to these photographs, we can now use photographs in order to look at these things. So you meditate with your eyes open and you imprint in the mind that this isn't attractive and this isn't something that you would be interested in engaging with and having sex with. Because if somebody ripped off their skin and were interested in having sex, you probably wouldn't be interested in doing that because of the way that the body looks. So the mind isn't seeing true reality, it's seeing the outer shell. And this is why we do things like hair and makeup and jewelry and perfumes and colognes and different clothing and things like this in order to make the body look attractive. We spend a lot of time trying to do that to make it attractive to other people to be interested in having sex with us. So you can develop this unattractiveness of the body so that the mind can be imprinted that this isn't something that you would be interested in having sex with. So it's not like you do it one time and then instantly the sexual cravings are gone, but slowly but surely you can gradually wear those away, reducing it. And then ultimately, if you'd like to eliminate 100%, you can. Because you can get to the point where you're at the second stage of enlightenment and still having a sexual relationship, and you can do all the other stuff on the path to enlightenment. And you would be pretty peaceful in the second stage of enlightenment. You're still going to be experiencing discontentedness, but your life's going to be pretty peaceful. But then during certain periods of time, you're going to notice that you're going to want to have sex and you can't get it. And your mind's going to be frustrated and agitated and annoyed. And slowly but surely, the peace and the joy that you experience as you're experiencing that during that second stage of enlightenment, that's going to be more of a priority to you, and it's going to be more interesting than this temporary experience that you're having with sex. Because with sex, you'll feel great for a couple of hours or a couple of days, but ultimately that gets worn away. It's impermanent. It fades away, and you're left back with the painful feelings again. So as you're experiencing 1 month, 2 months, 3 months of peacefulness and joy in the mind, that becomes a higher priority to you. And you ultimately might decide that you would like to get rid of sexual contact 100%, because this temporary pleasant feelings that you're experiencing pale in comparison to the qualities that you experience during those peaceful and joyful periods. We can't usually imagine something being better than sex, right? Especially as we're growing up and we're experiencing sex, we just can't imagine anything being better than sex. But there is something that's actually better than sex, and it's this enlightened mental state where the mind can be peaceful and joyful permanently, and it doesn't go up and down and up and down. But as long as you're having sex, you're still going to experience agitation and frustration when you can't get it. So you can decide for yourself if or when you ever decide to eliminate sexual activity. If you're younger, you might decide for the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years that you're going to have sex. Maybe you'd like to have a family or something like that. But there's going to come a time when you're probably deciding to let go of that, because you're not going to be on your deathbed still having sex. So there's the ability to train your mind to reduce sexual cravings and ultimately eliminate it 100% if you'd like. And you can actively do that when or if you ever get to the point that you're interested in doing that. So this this is one thing that can be done in order to eliminate sexual cravings. And this is one of those specialized meditations that if someone has a lot of craving for sex, they can use this to reduce it or ultimately eliminate it. But some people can eliminate their sexual cravings even without this meditation. So this is a specialized meditation that not everybody would necessarily need. Then there's a meditation to help you realize non-self. This isn't something that you would do right off of the beginning. For all of you guys that are just starting out in the group learning program, maybe you've been studying for 3 months or 4 months at this point, this isn't something that you need to go off and do. You usually start doing this meditation once your mind is in the jhanas, which is going to take some time to be able to get into the jhanas. What this meditation is it's very similar to the loving kindness meditation, where you're doing affirmations in the mind to disassociate with the body and the mind as being who you are as a person. So you repeat these affirmations multiple times in the mind, like, I am not the body. And you repeat that multiple times. I am not the mind. There is no self. I do not exist. I am not the body. I am not the mind. There is no self. I do not exist. So this starts to kind of separate, and the mind can start to see that the body is one thing, the mind is another thing, and that neither of these things are who you are. So if you try to just go in and start doing this, it's not going to actually be effective. You need to actually work with breathing mindfulness meditation, generosity, loving kindness meditation, practicing your loving kindness, building up your eightfold path. And now when you're moving into the jhanas, this is where you start working with this, because that's the time to get rid of personal existence view. So if you're ever interested in learning this, I actually teach it in detail in some of the courses and retreats where students are learning more about personal existence view and more deeply getting into it. So this is just a meditation I'll introduce to you here, but in the future, as you grow and develop, or on a private one-on-one basis, if you'd ever like to learn this, you can learn this when you're ready for it. So now what I'm going to do is open up to any and all questions that you guys have before I end out the class. And I see some questions coming in here on Zoom. So let me see what we've got here. We've got a question from Arvind. He's saying, sometimes when I practice loving kindness and saturate myself with the feelings of sympathetic joy, compassion, etc., my breath also stops and I find myself just saturated with the feeling of joy or peace. Then I just stay with that feeling and I'm unable to move on to the next stage of the practice, practicing my circle of metta. Is that okay? If it's okay, how long do I stay with that experience before moving to the next stage of the loving kindness practice? So what this is filling up the mind with loving kindness. The Buddha talks about enveloping the mind with loving kindness. So you would like the loving kindness to permeate in the mind. So if there's any individuals that you have anger, hatred, and ill will for in your life, you would like to be sure you're doing some meditation with those individuals. So how long you sit in that peace and the joy and that permeating feeling of the loving kindness, it's up to you. But you're going to need to at some point move into those affirmations and those rings to be able to ensure you fully clear out any anger, hatred, ill will, or lesser aversions towards any person or any groups of people that the mind might be holding on to any kind of anger towards. So you can decide for yourself based on the amount of time that you have in your meditation practice. Okay, we have a question from Brent. Teacher David, do you ever toss in a meditation to realize non-self on top of your meditation as a reminder? At this point in my life, I don't. I only do this meditation when I'm doing it with students. The same thing with loving kindness meditation. I only do it when I do it with students. But for a long time, I was doing loving kindness meditation exclusively. But I haven't seen any anger in the mind for many, many years. So I don't need loving kindness meditation any longer. I just use breathing mindfulness meditation because you can always increase your concentration and get more and more concentrated. But these other meditations, I don't actually use them in my own practice any longer. It's just to teach you guys what I did to lead to the mental state that I'm experiencing now. So if you would like to do this, if you're noticing that you've either recently realized non-self and you think that maybe there is no self there and that the mind has let go of personal existence view, you could put this in there every once in a while just to be sure that it's fully eradicated and completely gone. And you will notice that it's gone because when people are saying things about this body or this this individual, Brent, you won't get agitated, you won't get annoyed, you won't get frustrated, or like say you spill something on your clothing, you won't be embarrassed in front of other people. You'll have these kinds of experiences where in the past you would have gotten embarrassed, or you would have paid a lot of attention to that pimple or the mole or that gray hair or things like that, where now it's just not even affecting the mind whatsoever. So you'll know that you've realized non-self. And if for a little while you'd like to kind of just make sure it's completely eradicated, you could do that. But then ultimately, when it's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you haven't seen any indication that this particular fetter or personal existence view is still there, you'll probably just stop doing this meditation because you won't actually need it. The same thing with loving kindness meditation, that when it's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you haven't seen any anger whatsoever, not even the slightest dislike or the slightest ickiness towards another person, then you'll know it's time to let go of that or eliminate it from your practice, perhaps, because you're not interested in eliminating it too soon, right? Because if you eliminate it too soon, then the anger can creep back in there. So even if you're noticing the slightest ickiness or dislike towards another being, then there's still some anger, hatred, ill will. We call it that because that's the way to describe it, as a heightened quality. But there's these little ickiness where it's, I just don't like that person. I don't like the way they talk, or I don't like the way they look, or I don't like the way they walk, or something like, I don't like their hair, something like that, where the mind is just a little bit agitated with this person. That's still coming from the same poison. So you would like to keep loving kindness meditation in there until it's been a good 1 year, 2 years that you haven't seen any of that kind of stuff. This is called completely destroying the fetter. That's what the Buddha describes it as, eradicating it or destroying it. One of the ways he talks about it is cutting it off like a palm stump. If you know what a palm stump is it's like really flat to the ground. There's like no stump whatsoever. One of the ways that I describe it is like if you have a rag that's full of water, you would try to wring out every last little drop of this rag. And that's what you're trying to do with all of these fetters and all these pollutions, is get every last little drop out. Because if there's even one little drop in there, the mind is not yet enlightened. So you'd like to squeeze it and squeeze it and squeeze it and get every last little drop of water out. So continue to do these things until you're convinced and you can see the evidence over a long-term consistent period that there's no arising of these fetters whatsoever. All right, great discussion, guys. Let's see. Looks like Mayuli maybe has another question here. Teacher, I have been working on non-self, so this body doesn't look attractive, but this body is now becoming less healthy and less fit and wanting to go back of taking better care of this body. Does this mean I'm still attached to the self? Not necessarily, because it's wise decisions to take care of the body, right? If you're exercising or you're eating healthy and things like this, like you can be doing those things and still realize non-self. Like this is what the mind will tend to do. Is it a swing? It sounds like you've swung, right? Where at one time maybe you were clinging to the body and holding on to it, identifying who you are through this body. But now as you're starting to let that go and let go of personal existence view, the mind will oftentimes swing to this other side where now it's not taking care of things in the way that it needs to take care of it. Because the mind doesn't just let go of a craving and come right to the middle. It'd be beautiful if it did that, but that's not what it does. It usually overshoots the middle and it goes over here where now it's indifferent and it's not maybe taking care of the body in the same way that it used to. So you would like to let go of that and start making your way more towards the middle. But be careful, because the mind's going to potentially grab onto some of this personal existence view, because once again, it'll overshoot the middle when it's coming back. It's like a pendulum swinging back and forth, and you'd like to bring it to the middle more and more. So I would encourage anybody to make wise decisions about exercising. If you'd like to exercise and have a little bit of activity in your life, that's really wise. Making wise decisions about what you eat and what kind of food you ingest, that's really wise. And you can do that without identifying who you are through this body, but just seeing it as a wise decision that needs to happen in order to take care of this body and ensure that it's healthy. All right. Great questions, guys. Great discussion. Okay, I'm not seeing anything else. So what I'm going to do is end class with this last thing, which is the words of the Buddha, where he says, meditate, monks, do not be complacent, lest you regret it later. This is my instruction to you. So this is the only thing you'll ever see from the Buddha where he's kind of like, all right, go ahead, go do this thing, go meditate. Because he wasn't trying to convince people to do anything. He wasn't trying to force people or control people to do anything. But this is the closest thing you're ever going to get where he says, meditate, monks. Do not be complacent lest you regret it later. This is my instruction to you. Because when you're angry or you're sad or you're having guilt or shame or fear or you're lonely or bored, you're going to regret having not meditated. And that's what he's basically alerting you to, that, hey, don't regret it later, that when you're experiencing discontentedness, you'll regret having not meditated previously. And what I share with students is to never give up. Don't ever give up on your meditation practice, because giving up on your meditation practice is like resigning yourself to being angry for the rest of your life. It's like, you know what? I'm just going to be angry the rest of my life. That is not a life that you would be interested in living. Instead, just never, ever, ever give up and just keep working towards the goal the rest of this life. So here, the Buddha is encouraging you to meditate, and I'm encouraging you to meditate, that as you learn and grow and develop, you're going to need meditation, and your meditation practice is going to go up and down, but you can gradually build it up and get to the point where you're consistently meditating. Just like you clean this body every day, you need to clean the mind every day. Right? You can't imagine going a day without cleaning the body. But of course, when you're sick, every once in a while, maybe you might have a time or two per year where you don't clean the body. But if you're only cleaning the body, and that's what you've learned so far, you're not addressing the entire being. The mind needs to be cleaned as well. So if you're only cleaning the body, you're not attending to the entire being that is here, right? So you need to show loving kindness and compassion to this living being that is here, and not just clean the body, but clean the mind as well. And do this on a daily basis. Just like you take a shower and a bath, you need to clean the mind. Just like you eat every day, you need to be able to see meditation in the same way, that you can't imagine going a day without meditating. Not in a craving and attachment, but just as a wise decision that you gradually work towards. So never, ever, ever giving up. So I'm going to end class by just thanking all of you guys for joining for today's class. Thank you for deciding today is a day that you'd like to learn the teachings of the Buddha, because as you learn and you grow and you develop, this is the very best thing that you could ever do for yourself, for those around you, and for all of humanity. That you'll notice that your life and your mind will become more and more peaceful and joyful, because as you're training your mind, you're going to be causing less and less harm to others, and then you'll experience more and more improvement to the condition of the mind and the condition of your life. You're causing less and less harm, so less and less harm is coming back to you. So as you need help, feel free to reach out. I'm here to help you in classes, in the Facebook group, through private messages, and through scheduling appointments as well. Next week on Sunday in our group learning program, I'm going to be sharing with you chapter 12 of the book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This is titled, Craving is the Problem, What is the Solution? So here we're going to be talking about that as we lead into the next chapter, which is chapter 13, where I'm going to teach you how to go in and individually identify your individual attachments and almost surgically remove them. Everything that I've been teaching you so far is like a general way to build up your practice and generally be training the mind to let go of craving, desire, attachment. But now in chapter 12 and 13, I'm going to teach you how to go in and almost surgically remove them from the mind. So this will be very helpful for you as we go forward in the next couple of weeks. And then, of course, on Wednesdays, I do meditation with students and then open up to any and all questions that you have. And then on Monday, which is tomorrow morning, my time, in about 12 hours, I'm going to be starting a course which is called Foundation in the Path to Enlightenment. This is a 5-day course that I teach every month. It's the first full week of every month, and I live stream it, and you can join by Zoom. So if you'd like to join live, it's from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Thai time. And if there's sessions that you miss, it's all recorded on our Facebook channel and on the Facebook page, and then also on our YouTube channel. You'll be able to get access to it as well. So thank you again for joining, and perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Sawadee ka.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.